Hey guys, Michael here. Bit of a different video. Here in LA right now, currently doing some family stuff with my brother. But I just really wanted to talk about the 2025 federal elections. As a lot of you may know, I ran as an independent for Wentworth, and I started a progression video a few months ago, and I got up to episode 4 or 5, but then I stopped. Now the reason I stopped was it just got too stressful. I was doing too many things. I had to manage my social media. I had to go to all these pop-ups. The pre-election started, the writ was released. I had to get my signatures. We'll get into that soon, but I just wanted to say really sorry for all of those who were keeping up with that series. But don't worry, I'll be running in 2028. So I'll make sure to get some people to help me out so I can really show the full progression. Now, I just wanted to make this video to talk about what I learned as a candidate in the election, especially a young candidate. I just turned 20 a few months ago, and I was the second or third youngest candidate running in Australia, behind Will, who was a Liberal candidate in Canberra. And I also wanted to talk about behind the scenes, what happened in the election, my experience, maybe also talking about some important information for those who may want to get into politics in the future in Australia, but don't really know how it kind of changed me and my vision for the future and what my goals are for the future as well, especially for the 2028 election. So I just want to say, 7 or 8 months ago when I started, I didn't know anything about politics. I had read a few books relating to politics. Probably my biggest inspiration getting into politics was a book called Dreamers and Schemers, which talked about the entire political history of Australia. After I read that, I realized that there were a few holes in the system, and I really delved deeper and I started watching Punter's Politics. And if you've seen any of his videos and you've read my policies, you'll know that a lot of my policies are based around what Punter Politics says. His name's Conrad. And Conrad just releases really solid, great videos that talk about a lot of issues, especially regarding younger Australians, which I try to focus on more in my campaign. After I watched that video, or watched a few of his videos and read that book, I decided to run. Now, I wasn't particularly passionate about politics. I didn't really know who Dutton and Albo were, and I never really cared about an election. But after the election ended, I can say now that I'm super vested into politics. And I feel like I have a really good grasp as to who's in the Australian political landscape and different policies and how they're different intertwine with each other. Now, the results of the 2025 election are really interesting. Not just for my electorate, but the whole of Australia. The results for the 2025 election for me, in my electorate, Allegra Spender, she won again, so she'll be going into a second term. And me, Michael Richmond, your top dog, I got 1% of the votes, which was about 1.1 thousand voters in the electorate. Now, this result kind of disheartened me because I felt like I put so much money and time and effort into this project. But the more I think about it, I realize that 1, I haven't spent nearly as much money as the other candidates. 2, I'm one of the youngest candidates running in Australia. So a lot of people saw my youth as inexperienced, and so that deterred them away from voting for me. So when you really look at the grand scheme of things, my 1.1 thousand votes actually looks pretty solid. Like if you really think about it, 1.1 thousand people in my electorate saw me and put me number 1 on their preference list, which is really awesome. And I'm hoping that I'll run for the 2028 election and get even more votes. I'll have more financial backing, more volunteers, more supporters, more knowledge. Get more votes, if not, fingers crossed, even win the election. Now, what did I learn from getting into politics? I've learned that there's a lot of issues in Australia. Australia is an incredible country. I really love it a lot, but there are a lot of issues. And a lot of my policies, even though they're targeted more for Australians or younger Australians, they are really good for the long term, I feel. So I stand very firmly for housing, trying to get housing prices down and trying to increase supply for housing. I'm a big backer for cryptocurrencies. About 5% of people in the world currently adopt cryptocurrencies, and I feel like that number's just going to keep going up. So we really should jump on that. A huge thing in Australia is climate change. So I'm a supporter of nuclear, but as I've gone through this election, my view on the whole climate change landscape has changed. When I first saw nuclear, I thought it was just the best. We need to jump on it straight away. And then I kind of realized that both options, renewables and nuclear, aren't actually the best. Currently, I'm a big believer in fusion and nuclear. So I think we should set up nuclear now, and then 30, 40 years in the future, when fusion really picks up, then we transition our energy scape more towards fusion, okay? Now, if you don't know what nuclear is or what fusion is, I'd highly recommend watching some videos on those topics. My experience running, people who were the most against nuclear knew the least about it. And obviously, if you don't know a whole lot about nuclear, you think of Chernobyl, you think of Fukushima, you think of the waste that it produces, how long it takes to build, how much it's going to cost to build. And obviously those things are true. There is waste and it does cost a lot and it does take a long time to build, but not as much as people say. Now, a lot of people, especially towards the liberal side, say that there was a huge anti-nuclear campaign in this election. And I could 100% see that. A lot of Allegra Spenders volunteers were super against my stance on nuclear. They would all say that they love my campaign, they love what I'm doing, they love my age, they love a lot of my policies, because a lot of them are pretty common sense, but they hated my nuclear policies. So they would tell me their issues with nuclear, and I would essentially tell them why that issue is flawed. Some of them would move over to nuclear. They would actually be more open to supporting nuclear because of what I said. So people who are the most educated on nuclear supported it the most. And that's the same with cryptocurrencies. A lot of people who don't understand crypto really don't support crypto. So I would highly recommend doing your research on nuclear and doing your research on cryptos and then making your conclusions. Because I guarantee once you see the benefits that cryptocurrencies have and just how much potential it has for the future, we definitely want to be one of those countries that jump on it early. Another thing is health. I think we should restructure our healthcare system more towards proactive health rather than reactive health, just because we understand what prevents cancer, what prevents heart disease, what prevents Alzheimer's. And the biggest preventers is nutrition, sleep, and exercise. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not very educated on those three things. We have to push an education campaign for those three topics to, number one, put less strain on the healthcare system. And number two, make sure people are living longer, happier, and healthier, which if you think of it from an economical standpoint, that boosts productivity, which essentially boosts the economy and pushes up GDP. And in terms of just like lifestyle, your living standards are going to go up. You're going to spend less time in bed. You're going to have more energy to spend time with your friends and your family. And I think everybody can agree that's what they want in life. Practically, in the campaign, there were a lot of expenses, okay? My biggest expense were the shirts. I'll put some photos up on screen now, but these cost me about $3,000 to $4,000 to get them shipped in from China, and I got maybe about 100 to 150 of them. Call flutes were very, very expensive. Now, the more you buy in bulk, the cheaper they get per call flute. So obviously this favors the larger parties and Allegra Spender, because they're obviously gonna be buying like thousands of call flutes. So per unit, it's gonna be really cheap. But for me, I was spending maybe $30 to $35 per call flute, and I bought maybe about 70 call flutes in my whole campaign. So that was about $2,500. I also had to get pamphlets, which weren't too bad. And I also had a few volunteer friends who I would pay them. And then I also had social media ads, which were also, well, not extremely expensive, but they did add cost to the campaign. Now, I spent a total of $7,000 on my campaign. A lot of people like to say that you can buy campaigns, but if you look at Clive Palmer, he spent about $120 million for one seat last election. So I don't think money goes a big distance. Like, I'm a big believer that if you have good policies, like really good policies that benefit people genuinely, no loopholes, and if you're a genuinely decent person, you're having chats with people and you're not really putting on a persona, like this is actually you and you care about people, you will go far. I may have only gotten 1% of the votes, but I went from no one knowing me to a lot of people going, isn't that guy running? Isn't he one of the candidates? I made sure to have a really great conversation with everyone, okay? Everybody I spoke to. I was always kind and I would always put people in front. And my policies, in my opinion, are just common sense, good stuff. So I may not have had a lot of success in this election, but in my future elections, I'm sure we'll see, or hopefully we'll see a better result. Now, for those who don't understand a whole lot about what goes on behind the scenes, to be an official candidate on the ballot sheet, you need to wait for the writ to come out, and then you will have to do three things. The first thing is something called the Form 40, where it's just like general information. What's your name? What name do you want to be presented on the ballot? Address, gender, occupation, things like that. And then further down the sheet, they talk a lot about dual citizenship, because A rule in the Constitution is that any member who sits in Parliament, Senate, or the House of Reps cannot have dual citizenship. And so, as someone who has dual citizenship, I'm, half Australian, half Russian. I had to mention there was a lot of information about my grandparents from Russia, where they were born, what year they were born, their addresses, like a lot of information about them. So if you do have dual citizenship and you are planning on running, just be aware of that. There will be a ton of information that you'll have to fill out about them. So make sure you know that. The second thing is the Form 60C, which is essentially you need to get 100 signatures of people in your electorate. So I had to go around Wentworth and grab signatures. Be careful, because you need a lot more than just a signature. You need their first name, their last name, their date of birth, their postcode, their address, and their signatures. A lot of people are happy to give you their signatures, but a lot of people may not be happy to give you their date of birth and their address. Now they need this information to cross-check the signatures, but just be aware of that. Now the final thing, I've saved up a lot of money for this campaign, so it wasn't a huge issue for me, but there's a $2,000 deposit, which may be a challenge for a lot of people, okay? Now, if you get 4% of the votes, you get your $2,000 deposit back, but just keep in mind, you do have to give them $2,000 up front. There's no afterpay payments. You got to give them $2,000 up front. So when you go into the AEC office to give them all the information, you tap with your phone or you tap with your card, you put in your PIN, boom, giving them your deposit. The next thing was the roll for the ballots. You get accepted, and now you're officially in the election, which is great. Then you do this roll where you go into a certain office. You don't have to be there, but it's really good that you go there and just see what position you get. You sit down and then they roll this ball and then they assign you a number. So I was at the bottom, so I got assigned number 6, I think, or number 1. And then they roll the balls again. And depending on the order of the balls, that's the order of the ballots. So I was fortunate enough to get the top position on the ballot, which is fantastic. And then I think it was the Greens, One Nation, Labour, Liberal, and then Allegra Spender. So you've signed up, you've done the ballot roll, and then literally after that, you've got 2 weeks of pre-election voting, which in this election was really, really big. About 45% of voters did go to pre-votes. So next time, Michael, if you're watching this in the future, have volunteers at the pre-voting booths. And then you've got 1 day of the official voting, which makes up for 55% of the votes. So still a huge number. And then after that, hours after the polling booths are closed, they start tallying up the votes and you will know who's won the election on the day of voting, okay, in the afternoon. Not just for your electorate, but for the whole country, okay? Unless your electorate is really tight, you will know the results. If you have any questions about how to run, let me know in the comments below. I'll make sure to jump on those as quick as possible. But there is a lot of information or a lot of things you have to know in terms of running for the election. My biggest issue when I was running, it was probably that number one, I didn't have enough core flutes. I had maybe 40 core flutes up around the area. And then compared to Allegra Spender and Roanox, who had a collective maybe 800 up and about, not fun, okay? So number one, I would definitely have increased the amount of core flutes for my electorate. And number two, I would definitely have more volunteers. Now for pre-election polling, it was me, it was my girlfriend, my dad, a person who lives in my building, a guy called Steve. Thanks, Steve, for helping out. And then my friend, Nat. And then us 5 were the only ones who went to each of the polling booths. Now, the other candidates had 2 minimum on every single booth. Now, there was about 8 booths open. So they would have at least 16 volunteers all day for the whole 2 weeks. Now, obviously, I don't have those numbers, but hopefully next election, Michael, if you have those numbers, get people on each booth because they make a huge difference in the final results. Now, another really, really important thing is the website. Now, I put a lot of effort into my website, okay? I built it from scratch using code, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I think one of my biggest strengths was the simplicity of my website. My policies were very accessible, okay? And I had really good SEO on Google. So when you looked up Michael Richmond, you were able to find my policies really easily. And it gave me a lot of professionalism to my policies. If you're planning on running for the next election, make sure you have a really solid website. Make sure all of your policies are really outlined very clearly, okay? People love clarity. My prediction for the future, because now there's more younger voters than older voters, a very strong position to be in as a politician is having a lot of transparency, a lot of clarity, okay? People love that. What we don't want to see is politicians just ranting and avoiding questions. When I went to forums to speak, I made sure to keep my answers clear, concise, straight to the point, and as short as possible. So people didn't have to hear me yap and talk and rant about all this random stuff that they just don't care about. When they're asking a question, they want an answer. Politicians, from what I've seen, love to avoid questions. They love to wrap around questions, and we don't want to see that, especially for the future elections, as there's more and more younger people in the electorates. One thing I wasn't expecting this election was the amount of bullying that I would receive, especially from other candidates and the volunteers. I knew this was a heated election, especially with in my electorate, the Liberals versus Allegra. But wow, I won't go into the specifics, but some of the volunteers on Allegra's team weren't very nice to me. They were calling me stupid and idiot and were just being very insulting, very direct to my face. I know we're on different political sides, but you gotta realize we're all trying to achieve the same thing, okay? I like to say it like this. We're all on different railroad tracks, but we're all trying to hit the same point. We want a better Australia for all Australians. The only difference is that we have different policies and methods of getting there. I know we disagree on climate change, like how we're going to get there, but I'm not going to be mean to you. I'm not going to be disrespectful to you. So don't be disrespectful to me, especially as a candidate. You can't be disrespectful to the candidates. None of my volunteers were disrespectful to anyone. I made sure that regardless of their beliefs, they were very respectful to every single person. Now, I wasn't the only one who experienced some bad stuff. When I went to the booths, especially the rec center, some of the Greens volunteers were spouting really awful things to the Liberal volunteers, especially in regards to the Palestine-Israel conflict. Just really, really bad, disgusting. So if you're getting into politics, be aware you may experience some of that stuff. Avoid it, report it, move on. I also got insulted and bullied by one of the other candidates. Won't mention who it was, but again, report it, avoid it, move on. Just disrespectful, but it happens. If you're getting into politics, you need a thick skin. People kept telling me that. I knew it from the start. I like to joke that I was in the trenches, getting shot from both sides, okay? My fellow politicians and the people who don't agree with me. But that's just how politics is. I enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, don't get into politics. Now, what am I going to do in the future? Well, I'm going to run in the 2028 elections, most likely as an independent. Now, me personally, I lean more towards the Liberals. A lot of people disagree with my leaning towards the Liberals, which is fine. Let me try to explain why I support the Liberals. This is just my view. Now, you got to keep in mind, I'm a 20-year-old. My views are very malleable. They can change a lot. So when people are coming up to me and they're insulting my position and insulting the fact that I have Liberals preference number 2, you may disagree with me. I understand that. I disagree with you. But if you're insulting me, that's going to make me view more poorly in what you've preferenced. A lot of people who voted Greens were very negative towards me putting Liberals second. Now, if you can explain to me why me putting Liberals second is bad, I will lower the Liberal preferences. I had One Nation's preference number 3. Some people came up to me and they explained to me why they didn't agree with the One Nation. Straight away, I put them number 5th. It's very simple. But if you can't give me solid answers, I'm not going to change the Liberals. Same with the climate change movement, same with housing. One of my biggest things is that I'm open and curious, and I had that mindset the whole time in the election. People could change my views on anything if they gave me good enough reasons. We're moving into an era of politics where it is not about lies, it's not about fear-mongering, but it's about facts. Well, I'm not starting that movement, but I'm part of that movement. Everything that I found was based on facts. All of my policies, to me, were based on facts. They weren't opinions, they were factual. If you found better facts than me, I would change them. But why do I have Liberals preference second? Well, my biggest idea as a 20-year-old is that Labor loves welfare programs and they love giving to people. Liberals are very focused on business. We all know this. Now, my whole idea in politics is to focus on the long term, not the short term. Very simply, when you have welfare programs, you're giving people energy relief bills, you're giving them smaller mortgages because you're subsidizing mortgages, you're subsidizing solar panels. This means higher government spending in the short term, which means people are happy short term, but unfortunately that higher spending is not towards infrastructure or towards boosting growth in the economy. So you're experiencing really great short-term results, but you're having a negative long-term results. You may have stagnated productivity as a result of the higher government spending because you've had to raise taxes or you've had to cut corners elsewhere. which doesn't lower people's living standard, but it does have a negative effect on people. Now, the Liberals take an extreme to this. They don't like any welfare programs. They want to cut Medicare, which I think is awful. But what the Liberals do really well is that they want to cut spendings in the government. They want to focus primarily on businesses, because we live in a capitalist society. If we're in a socialist or a communist society, it would be very different. But because we're capitalist and we're focused very much on money, business is the primary goal that we have to focus on. Or business is primarily focused when it comes to capitalism. Because if you have tons of businesses doing very well in your country, it's going to boost the amount of money that the government can spend, which means it boosts your living standards because you're going to have more welfare programs, better jobs to work at, more disposable income to spend, higher quality houses. Everything's better if your country is rich. So Liberals, they don't like you. They like business. So you're not having a fun time short term, but in terms of long term, they're doing a great job because they're making sure that there's more business in Australia. You're able to thrive in the long term. Now, there are a few things the Liberals can do better. I 100% agree. Number one, no racism. Number two, no sexism. Number three, mutual respect for everyone. Number four, don't cut essential welfare programs like Medicare. Number five, listen to the voters. They don't like to listen, and they like to assume what you want, but they don't actually give it to you, which is just not great. Okay, if they do those 5 things, the Liberals will be a lot more popular. Now, as you've seen in this election, they got 43, 45 seats. Not great. So we'll most likely see those changes be implemented between now and the 2028 elections, or else the Liberals are going to disappear. They most likely want to win their seats back, and they have to make changes. And the people who vote the politicians in are you, me, and everyone else. So if they make us happy, we'll vote them in. Very simple. That's about everything I can think about for this video. If you enjoy videos like this, where it's just me sitting and talking to you, let me know. I'll make more videos like this. And I'll see all of you guys in the future videos. Take care.